We are going to have a fantastic session now, which is all about disruption, death by disruption. Facebook, Amazon, Disney, could evolution become a small fish? Disney are confirming their interest in sports betting. Fanatics desperately looking for a perfect match to enter the iGaming industry. And Jeff Bezos' eyes could be on a giant gambling company as well. So this is a very topical session. If you scan that QR code, it's going to connect with this Slido thing on this iPad, and you will be able to ask questions. Oops, I've just been logged out. Okay, we'll work on that. Anyway, get your questions in via Slido. So ladies and gents, we got 4 fantastic speakers who are going to join me to talk about this area of disruption. There's an old saying, disrupt or be disrupted. I can't think of an industry that's moving as fast along that trajectory right now than iGaming. So this is the perfect time to discuss it. So I'm going to invite them on stage one by one. I would like you to give them a very, very warm welcome. So first, please welcome the EVP of New Revenues at DAZN, the mighty John Turnbull. Welcome, John, on stage. Thank you. Ian Turnbull, I beg your pardon. Ian Turnbull, how are you? Welcome, Ian. How you doing? Thanks, dude. Great to see you. Ian Turnbull, folks. Wonderful. We're now going to welcome the CEO of Incentive Games, John Gordon. Big round of applause. Thank you, John. Great to see you.
Cheers, man.
Owner of a very fine NFT as well. We're now going to welcome the founder and CEO of Kero Sports, Tomash Devenishek. Welcome, Tomash. Great to see you, Tomash. And rounding up our fantastic quartet, we got the Director of Gaming at Trustly, John Mallia. Welcome, John. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Cheers, Rory. Okay. In time-honored fashion, I'm sure that your fine work is very familiar with most of the people here, many of the hundreds of people joining us via the live stream, but it'd be great if you could introduce yourselves and what you do to the audience. We're going to start with your good self, Ian.
So I'm the EVP of New Revenues at DAZN, so I look after the non-broadcast, non-advertising revenues, so that's betting, e-commerce, NFTs, and anything else we can think of.
Fantastic. Passing seamlessly over to your good self, John.
Yeah, I'm John Gordon. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Incentive Games, and we're the world's leading free-to-play games provider in the industry.
Fantastic. And how about your good self, Tomash?
Tomash Devenishek, CEO and founder of Kero Sports. We're a micro-betting, white-label B2B provider trying to reimagine the sportsbook experience through the lens of modern-day technologies and consumer behavior.
Excellent. Fantastic intro. And your good self, John Mallia.
So, John Mallia, Director of Gaming at Trustly. Trustly effectively is bank payments for the future, really. But yeah, my role is effectively working with our current merchants and taking business forward.
Fantastic. Okay, I'd like to just open it up with a big question. How do we all think the gaming market is going to merge with mainstream verticals? We've heard this in our fantastic keynote session yesterday. We've been hearing people talk about it all over the whole kind of program. Do we think it's happening? Do we think it's going to happen? How do we think it's going to happen? Who'd like to jump in and make some predictions? Ian, you're smiling there. Well volunteered, sir.
So I think it is happening. I mean, I think you kind of mentioned a couple of examples in your intro. It was interesting that Bob Chapek, the CEO of Walt Disney, came out and made quite a firm statement about getting into betting, and then 5 days later said, we don't want to be a book, because Walt Disney doesn't want to get into that space. So,
sure.
So I think some of the big companies, they're already making a huge amount of money from betting and gaming as advertisers, or in the case of Amazon, via AWS as a technology supplier. And I think they'll continue to do that. Whether we see them actually go in with both feet into the betting and gaming space, I have some doubts, because I think there are moral conflicts for them. There's jeopardizing existing revenue streams and so on. But I think that conversion is happening, and it's happening because it's an obvious thing to happen, right? If I'm a sports fan, I like to watch sports. I probably like to bet on sports. I probably buy football jerseys. I probably play fantasy sports. Wouldn't it be a wonderful world if all of those things can be done in one place in a very convenient way and simultaneously, like while I'm watching my favorite sports? So I think there's a very compelling logic to convergence happening, but I think some companies will find it easier to move into that space because of their existing businesses or not. So I think obviously DAZN is moving into that space. Fanatics, we know, is going to move into that space. I do have question marks as to whether the ESPNs and the Googles and the Metas of this world will do anything that would jeopardize their existing kind of revenue streams by becoming an operator in that space. They're already making significant sums of money from supplying services. So.
Yeah, indeed. There's that old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, particularly when you have a kind of marquee household family brand like Disney. They're going to be a bit careful around this stuff. But John, coming over to yourself, I mean, what do you think the outlook is on a global scale? It's obviously not just about the big brands from the States. There's a whole global consideration as well.
Yeah, I think we've seen it many times where media companies try to step into it. So they say, okay, well, we're good at being an affiliate. Let's try to be our own book. So you see LiveScore, are a phenomenal affiliate. They bring out LiveScore Bet, one of our clients, and we've helped them, that word converge. It's not as easy as some may think. You might have 50 million users on your app, but it's not a straight convergence there. It's often very difficult to get them across, but there's some good examples there for LiveScore to LiveScore Bet or LiveScore to Virgin Bet, for example, but there's been more examples where it's not gone well. So Sunbets, where they've got the perfect demographic of the users on the paper, will just create a betting company. It's not really that simple. I think, and we've seen this score as well, do spend quite a bit of money, try to converge. I think it needs to be well thought out. So wherever these companies see themselves, whether it's a massive affiliate or their own book, the consumers aren't stupid. It needs to be done in a well thought out, stepwise process, or it will not work.
Yeah, they can kind of, they can sense when something's kind of trying to fit into the wrong shape, as it were.
Yeah.
And we're coming over to yourself, Tomash. I mean, this opens up the whole area. The can of worms is a customer experience, user experience design. Obviously, companies like Netflix, they spend, so much of their development budget on just delivering a seamless UX. They're bringing together content from all these different places, but the end user experience is just second to none. I mean, how do you think that overlays with this area of disruption and kind of the big brands joining with the kind of iGaming sector?
Yeah, I think you can step aside from the gaming space for a second and just see what Google did or YouTube did from a media standpoint, right, to disrupt that industry, or what Instagram did from kind of connecting people through images. And there are so many examples where big tech has come in and reinvented the experience from a consumer standpoint and then completely started to dominate that particular industry. So the question for the audience is really, there's two options for the industry. Either consumer trends in terms of digital behavior are going to disrupt the industry, or the industry is going to disrupt consumer trends, right? And so it's probably the former, not the latter.
Yeah.
And how we think about it is TikTok today is the #1 destination on the web, right? That wasn't true a year ago, but it is now. So what makes that product so habitual and so entertaining to the point where it becomes the #1 destination on the web? And there are certain commonalities like algorithmic curation, ease of use, mindless consumer experience, right? Which are really not present in the sports betting realm today. So that's how we think the outside tech companies are going to come in and disrupt the industry by providing consumers with something they're habitually conditioned to elsewhere.
Right, that's super interesting. And coming over to yourself, John M. I'll use John M. and John G. from this stage. John M., do we think that because markets are getting more and more regulated and there's this kind of overall trend towards better regulation, is this going to open up the opportunities for these marquee brands to work more with the iGaming sector, would you say?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, one of the major roadblocks, right, for any of the, let's say, big names to go into the gambling industry was always the fact that it was a taboo industry. And the more the industry becomes regulated, the operators, the service providers, and so on, is just moving towards being so compliant and all of these things, which then make it not that much of an issue for a household brand, kind of like Disney, DAZN, and so on. You've got brands that aren't necessarily going to be seen as doing something bad, that they're going into the gambling industry. So the more the industry moves towards the regulated side of things, yes, it brings with it its challenges, but it's also moving towards just being accepted as another form of entertainment now.
Yeah.
And the more it moves, and that's different markets, whether it's in Europe or in North America and so on, the more it moves towards that way, the more it's going to mean that companies that might not have looked at gaming, for several reasons, now say, well, there's a good opportunity there to make money, really. And they also bring with them let's say, the polished product, right? Which is also good for the industry because it means it's constantly stepping up its game.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. We will be coming back to those points. Thank you, John. And coming back over to yourself, Ian. Now, what's your take on whether big companies can actually do this? Can they be this disruptive? Because, iGaming, a very fast-moving, disruptive space, always ahead of the curve. What happens when a big, a tech giant or a, consumer giant gets involved in the market? How do they do disruption?
I mean, I think particularly the tech giants have been very good at reinventing themselves and disrupting constantly, right?
Sure.
I mean, I think Amazon has kind of set up various different businesses within their own kind of global business and made a success many times over. First selling books, then a store, then AWS, then Prime. They've kind of replicated their model many times over. So there's no reason why they couldn't successfully launch a business, and they have the firepower, the technology, the money to do so. Same Google, same Facebook. I just don't know that there's necessarily the appetite to do it, or whether it fits into their overall strategy. But I think they've got the building blocks and the capability. I think to John's point, often the people that have been less successful that haven't necessarily been the tech giants. They've perhaps been media companies that have perhaps been a little more kind of set in their ways and don't have that kind of technology prowess to actually innovate and develop apps and so on. But I think that the tech guys could do it. But I mean, it's interesting to John's point just how much things have changed. So, prior to 2018, AWS didn't take any gambling workloads on their platform. Yeah. Google opened up their store for apps, over a number of different territories over a number of years. So actually, that has moved, but effectively, it's moved in the direction of accepting more money as suppliers, not necessarily getting in to run their own books.
Right, indeed. I mean, John, coming over to yourself. Do you think Amazon would actually step for, because, exactly as Ian mentioned, Amazon, Google, they're making a fortune from the iGaming sector already. Do you think they would step over that line?
Yeah, I don't think there's a need to. Like you say, like Ian's saying, optically, the person in the street doesn't think Amazon or Google have anything to do with gambling at all. So why would they step into it? They're making enough money out of it. And it is an art form. So the ones that I see as being a success in the future in America, like Bet365, FanDuel, Fanatics, they're either going to have a deep history of betting, sports betting, or they're going to buy it in like Fanatics have done. Yeah. So, I just don't think it's optically the right thing for the Googles or the Facebooks to do. And the reason I believe that maybe a company like Fanatics would be a big success is the fact that I like the way they're doing things. They're not just saying, okay, we need to be alive for the NFL season. They're actually saying, no, the product needs to be right. Right. So even if we miss a certain key day of a sporting event, another one's coming round. Yeah. And that key focus on product. Talk about disruption. It's probably the focus on product. That people can, whichever, if you're a media company with 50 million active users, yes, you might be able to get them to sign up to a betting product, but that product has to be best in class. Yes. And that's the key thing that companies have missed in the past as well, is just get it out. We need to be live for the Super Bowl. We need to be live for this or that. No, you need your product to be good enough. Otherwise, the money you're spending to acquire those customers will not be retained. And that's the heart of everything.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't fake it. The audience will, run a mile. And, speaking of which, Tomash, we're talking about the product design, the user experience, but we're also talking about how big tech has been very innovative in terms of using new technology, maybe like machine learning, artificial intelligence. Now, I believe you're collaborating with Ian. Can you talk about this? Talk to us a bit about, the kind of the CX, passion under the hood and where the tech is overlapping with a great customer experience.
Yeah, so, I mean, think about it in terms of just general progression of products in the industry, right? It's been incremental improvements on, like, this works, let's go deeper down that rabbit hole. And consumer behavior in the meantime, over the last 20 years, has changed fundamentally. So I think the better way to think about products, and probably how an Amazon or a Google would think about it if they were to enter the space, is let's start with the actual user need, right? What does the mass audience need to do? And I think that's entertainment. I don't think it's the trading experience that is predominant today in a sportsbook environment. And so I think where interesting technologies come into play is algorithmic curation, for example. What does that mean? Well, when you open up TikTok or Instagram, the only effort you as a user have to exert is slide your thumb up, right? Mentally, you're not thinking, you're not calculating probabilities, you're not squinting your eyes because you're looking at 50 different bets. And so that has to happen, but it's sort of conflicting with today's priorities. So it's a bit of a challenging endeavor for somebody on the product side at a big gaming provider to say, no, listen, we're going to scrap what we have today and go towards this thing. But if you're starting from scratch, almost like the iPhone, right? Everybody was improving the keyboards and whatever. And then Steve Jobs said, I don't think we need keyboards. And they had the technology like, multi-finger touch available at that point. And so they just reinvented the behavior from scratch. And I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And things like ML, AI, personalization, but most importantly, curation is going to be important because people will not want to think en masse.
Yes.
Traders will want to think.
Yeah,
But
I agree. But I also agree that I also believe that these bigger companies like the Bet365s of the world are actually adopting that. If you come to that, they've got the bet builder there with the 3 or 4 and bets that are popular. Plus, you've got your odds boost. So it is becoming more of a don't use your cognitive part of your brain, just press this button, and that will become more and more customized. So I think some of the big ones are getting there; they're understanding it, whereas others are sort of lame.
And if I may add, the industry already know this through casino products, right? The best monetizable user experience is slots. Why? Because the person just has to click one thing. And so, but for some reason that never really translated into the sportsbook experience. But it's possible now. You have technology that can enable a slots-like sportsbook experience. And so clearly, at the very least, that's something worth trying. And to John's point, some are already trying Bet365. I think Jake Paul and what they're doing with Better is a great example.
Yeah, absolutely. And coming over to John, now talk to us a bit about, we're hearing, from everybody, it's very much about entertainment, about the demands of the new demographics. They want to have the seamless experience. Is there a place for gamifying the experience even further? I mean, what would you say about that whole area?
I think there is space for it for sure. And the industry has already tried that in the past, right? There have been brands that have tried to gamify further. So obviously, slots are pretty traditional in how they work, same for sports betting and so on. You have mini games within them now when it comes to slots, but there have been companies that have tried, to go one step further, add an additional layer to that, try to make it more sociable and so on. I think the one thing that so far we've seen in the industry over the last few years is, traditionally speaking, users will go back to the base concept of what the product is. But it doesn't mean that the other products were bad. I think it's a case of, the right product at the right time with the right packaging. Just to what Tomash was mentioning as a totally separate example from gaming, right? The iPhone, it wasn't the first digital screen phone in there. It was just well packaged, well presented, right? And that's the same thing when we're talking about gamifying, having a more polished user experience and so on. So going back to the, let's say original point that was being discussed, when these larger brands, the big tech and so on are coming into play, previously you had one set of people working on trying to gamify an experience. Now you're getting companies from industries whose job and product literally is to entertain people. And how will that now pass over to what is, a gambling experience? Will that make sports betting much more fun? Can there be different ways? Same with casino and so on. So I think it is an area which hasn't been explored enough yet. I think there clearly can be a lot of things put into play there. I think Tomash also mentioned user behavior and so on. These sort of things come into play the more you delve, the more you kind of build a customized product.
Sure.
And I don't think gambling really has scratched the surface with that yet. I think there's so much more that can be done. which is, I think, also why these big companies are looking at the industry and saying, okay, we can do better than that, and we will try to.
Can I just expand on that? I think what's actually happened is we've seen many failures in the industry where they've tried to add leaderboards, collectibles, points, prizes, share, social, this and that, and it's failed massively. I mean, there's a company in America that I don't want to mention, but their reward loyalty scheme they've got is so complex, it's too confusing for anyone, and it's quite you should do the opposite. It's just make it simple, make it feel rewarding. No one wants to feel like they're in a part of a loyalty scheme with the bookmaker and casino. Yeah. Just make it a daily, free-to-play, press a button, and they'll come back every day and reward them. And having all these bells and whistles, but to what end? And that's why someone would read a gamification book, one of my clients, and then they'd say, oh, we want this and that. And it's like, no, just keep it simple and make it rewarding. And I think, although we think we've not seen it, we have seen it. It's just failed lots and lots of times.
Yeah, if you kind of have a solution in search of a problem, it's not really going to work. You do have to stand in the user's shoes, use that kind of user-centric design to actually give them something exactly as you say, that's going to be rewarding, that they're going to value and enjoy the experience. Yeah. But Ian, coming over to yourself now, we've heard about the need for simplicity, great UX and CX, entertainment, innovation, but all of this in this industry sits on a bedrock of regulation and compliance. I mean, how do you think like some of these overlapped areas are going to handle compliance, the specific jurisdictions, etc.? What do you think is going to happen in this space?
For sure, it's going to be very complex for people in this territory. It's complex for us. We kind of launched our first betting service with a partner last month, and it's challenging, right? Getting regulated in a market, going live in multiple markets is challenging. And then when you think about convergence, what that means from a product perspective, if you're talking about converging registration paths or having single accounts, that's actually quite a complex area because part of it's governed by individual regulators in individual markets, and then part of it won't be because it might be the other side of your business. So I think just the complexity of piecing it together is a challenge, but it's a challenge that's overcomable, I think, right? I think the regulators are, in my experience anyway, very open to having conversations about how these things work, and provided you're very kind of transparent and methodical about how you're presenting things to regulators, I think that they want to see people succeed as well, right? I mean, I don't think they want to put up unnecessary barriers. So I just think it adds to the complexity. But I think, to the point of sociability and gambling, I just wanted to pick up on that point. There are some quite good examples as well, quite big verticals, things like bingo and poker, where you've had peer-to-peer, very gamified experiences with chat and games and so on. I think some of the promotional tools that people have implemented have been very successful in the gambling space. But I agree, sometimes, if that's your goal, just to create that rather than understanding the consumer need, you probably won't get the best outcome. And I think simplicity as well. I do think there are different strands, though. Final point on that is that there will be players that want to bet very casually and frequently, but not very much money. There will also be people that want to bet on a horse and do it solitary using their phone every Saturday, right? And that's their thing, right? And that's still maybe 30% of the market in the UK, right? So it's not an insignificant market. So I think the casual will exist in parallel to the slightly different betting behaviors that we see as well.
Absolutely. Great point, Ian. I'd like to hand that over to yourself, John. Do we think that this is actually going to open up new markets for the industry? We've heard about there's going to be casual gamers there. What's the overlap of kind of well-known brands and more casual gamers? Do we think this is like a new opportunity for the market?
Yeah, I think it all depends again on who is actually going to make kind of that step forward. But one thing which is great about this industry is, even on this panel, right, you're hearing kind of the same tone. There are opportunities, but you're hearing different points of view. And I think that's where the gambling industry is, so great, because it literally will push the boundaries every time that it can. And it will eventually find a way of improving what there is. So yes, I think there has to be some spillover between the social side, between what is hardcore gaming, which will always exist. As Ian mentioned, whoever likes betting on a single horse won't necessarily like playing bingo, right? It's different people. But at the end of the day, there's billions of people in this world, and you were catering to one set. Gambling is moving towards catering to different types. This is the same like with, simple form of PC gaming.
Sure.
Right? If you're playing a sports game, it doesn't mean that you like playing a puzzle game or something. But this industry will end up catering for the masses the more time passes.
Fantastic. Well, it does sound, as we reach less than a minute on the clock, it sounds like we're in a very pivotal time. The message, as always, is disrupt or be disrupted. Where do you stand on the continuum? I would have recommend that you speak to these gentlemen and reach out. Are you all here for the rest of the day? Fantastic. Find them over networking drinks on the roof after the event. Find them on LinkedIn, and let's keep the disruption going in the right way. Ladies and gents, please join me in thanking Ian Turnbull, John Gordon, Tomash, Devenishek, and John Mallia. Thank you so much.